Good afternoon. Thank you for joining myself. My name's Zoe Holloway and I'm the Officials and Volunteer Development Officer.
And I'm Eva Brewer. I'm Club Manager for North East Wales.
I'm Barry Edwards and I'm Club Manager for North West Wales.
If you have any questions as we're going along, feel free to raise your virtual hand and also use the chat function. So in this session, we'll be covering recruitment, so the welcome touch points in your club, and also typology of different volunteer routes into sport, and retaining how to keep our volunteers engaged and coming back each week to the club, and then also valuing volunteers, rewarding them and keeping them in the volunteer pathway. So how to engage new volunteers? By being creative, having a welcoming atmosphere, knowing your audience. I'm going to be talking about the different routes into volunteering, so not necessarily people just within your sports club. You can find volunteers elsewhere, and also facilitating opportunities for new volunteers, and also selling the benefits, and then also looking for the right people for the right roles. So looking at people's skill set. So we have different typology of routes into volunteering in sport, and the different categories are active parents, sport lovers, skilled volunteers, and students. So I'm just going to talk about these ones, the different demographics. So active parents tend to be 30 to 45. They could be in part-time or full-time work, whereas sport lovers have a wider age range of 20 to 55. And our skilled volunteers typically tend to be age 45 and above. A combination of either full-time and part-time or even retired, whereas students obviously tend to be around 18 to 25. They can play different roles within the club, so active parents tend to take on more of a coaching role, whereas sport lovers have more common coaching role, and where our skilled volunteers tend to choose more non-coaching roles. So each of these have different motivations for why they participate in sport and volunteer. So the motivations for active parents is to spend time with their children, set a good example for their children, and also encouraging the children to stay involved in sports, or they potentially have been asked by the club to volunteer and get involved. Whereas sports lovers, they just have a passion for the sport and they want to give something back to the sport. Potentially this could be retired athletes as well. Skilled volunteers, yeah, they want a sense of giving back something back to the community. They recognize, that this might be to the younger generation as well, and also giving them benefits of volunteering. And it could be a desired help to help a family or friend member. Students their motivation tends to be around experience and CV development. So what puts their volunteer role at risk? So active parents, there's a variety of commitments, and they tend to want a smaller volunteer role. So that's something you need to consider when you have parents volunteering. In terms of sport lovers, obviously, it's important not to overwhelm them. Like I said, the reason they might have joined is because they have an injury, so they potentially might go back to sport. So this might not be they might not continue to volunteer for the long term. Whereas a skilled volunteer, this is a way, this could be a hobby for them to volunteer and give back. That what puts students at risk, potentially if they gain a full-time job, or they potentially could become a PE teacher, so this limits their time into volunteering. In terms of progression aspirations, so parents tend to have less desire to progress, but are happy to receive training, which helps them improve and have more knowledge around the sport and help their children through the sport. Whereas actually sport lovers tend to have more desire to progress, up to the, for example, officials, they might progress further down the pathway if you are a sports lover. And like I said before, the skilled volunteers tends to be a non-coaching role. So they could get more and more involved in the club in different ways. And students, their nature, obviously, it could be that they study in a sports-related profession. So in terms of seeking out the opportunities, The only group who really tend to seek out the opportunities is students. Everyone else tends to be asked or invited. So that's something I think it's important to think about as we go along through this session, that actually it's the club's responsibility and your responsibility to approach these people to find out if they want to volunteer. Okay, so like I said, don't wait for volunteers to come to ask for help. Like I said, a first one obviously is when you've got new members joining your club, you know, ask the parents as well about helping out. You know, showcase the great work that your volunteers do, you know, shout about it, you know, in your club, but also in the local area, in the local community. You know, I'm sure the local authorities would like to, you know, you can get involved with them. And I think Barry and Eva would be able to give you some more information on that. You know, don't assume someone would be interested in a specific role because of their job. Sometimes people want to escape from their day-to-day role. So, you know, someone might want something completely different to what they do day to day. And like I said, even the smallest role can be the biggest help. Like we said, like more hands make light work. I'll pass over to Eva.
Okay, so what we'd like you to do now is think about what you think a great volunteer environment feels like. So what does it feel like for somebody coming into your club and helping out? Why do you want them to come and help and feel valued? So first of all, if you pick 5 words that you want your club volunteer environment to feel like, and just spend a few minutes putting those together. And then if you can rank those in importance from 1 to 5, with 1 being the most important and obviously 5 being the least, but still important. And then what we'll do is we'll ask you to share with the group, and we'll have a discussion about that. Okay, so thanks for that great discussion. So what we want to make sure that we do is that we have the best environment for our pupils, and by that we mean having best practice. So when somebody is just coming into the volunteering environment, we want to make sure that they have good confidence and they know what they're doing. And the best way of doing that is by asking them to shadow with another volunteer, show them the ropes. It's no good just leaving somebody to do something and they're floundering, you know, if it's something a little bit technical, or they're not sure where equipment is, or whatever the role is. If you just leave somebody to get on with it themselves, chances are they won't come back and volunteer again. Make them feel welcome. Obviously, you know, it is difficult sometimes to get volunteers, so we want to make sure that we look after them. So make them feel welcome, make sure that you know their name and know how to pronounce it. That's always one from my side. And make sure that you introduce them to other people, introduce them to the coaches, introduce them to the athletes as you go around, and other people on the committee as well. And make sure that they feel like they're part of your club family. And most importantly, say thank you at the end of every session, and you know, every time they come and help, that goes a long way. Don't just assume that they know that you appreciate what they've done. Always say thank you. Okay, so again, what we want to do is just have a think about your own volunteering experience. And this time think about 5 words that you don't want your club volunteer to feel. What would be the things that you would hate them to feel? Again, ranking them in importance, and then afterwards, again, we'll share with the group and have a discussion. Okay, so what to avoid then? So make sure you don't get the wrong person delivering the wrong message. What you don't want is negative messages going out to new volunteers. It may be that somebody's had something that's happened in the past and they like sharing that at every opportunity, and it will put people off. If you do have that in your club, try and address that with the individual themselves. So yeah, make sure that you're pairing somebody with somebody that's positive and can show them the right way of doing things. Also, don't overwhelm with responsibility. So think about the task or the job that you're asking them to do. Do they actually have those skills? Do they know what they're doing? If not, how can you help them? How can you make sure that they have the training and the knowledge to be able to achieve that task? What we don't want to do is set up people to fail. And lastly, don't pressure people into roles. Don't use guilt as a factor, especially with roles where it might be on a committee, for example. If you've got roles on a committee that need filling, then send that information out beforehand as far as you can, and make sure that people have the opportunity to ask questions and find out about the role. How much time is it going to take up? What does the role involve? What you don't want to do is come to an AGM of your club and then say, right, we need to have this role filled, otherwise we can't affiliate to Welsh Athletics. And then somebody feels like they have to say yes on the day just to get that role filled. So just be careful about that. Give as much information as possible. Okay, so thinking about your own club, can you describe your current club environment? What are 3 things that you're doing well in terms of volunteers, and 3 things that you could improve on?
Well, in terms of looking at the making connections, so I think here in terms of the key aspect is listening to other clubs. There's plenty of experience and knowledge out there, so it's making the best of those scenarios, sharing ideas and making sure that any mistakes that have been learned in previous years, that any knowledge and understanding is kind of passed over. And then in terms of that collaboration, I think that's the key word there in terms of utilising and helping one another. So in pairs, if you can discuss your current volunteer culture at your club, and hopefully you can have a clearer picture on how things look across Wales. Okay, in terms of creating a great volunteer culture at your club, it's really, really important in terms of having clear vision and having those realistic goals aligned to that vision. Leading with passion and clarity, I think that's a really key aspect in terms of embracing the volunteers. And if they can see that there's a clear passion, a clear goal, clear vision, with plenty of clarity, then that's something that they, as volunteers, they would like to be involved with. And creating and encouraging that environment. So that encouraging aspect is that they feel welcomed and it's a role that they can grow and develop. And I think this natural growth is what we're looking for here, rather than going into kind of a setting where people are told this is exactly what you're doing and this is exactly how you're going to do it. Making that environment an encouraging one. Setting expectations, and this is often where kind of new volunteers that attend a club and at the first sight of a massive workload or high demands, those expectations are kind of overreached. So really important that we set the tone early and making sure that those expectations are clear on both sides, from a volunteer's perspective and then from the club or the committee who might be rolling out some roles and responsibilities. That positivity, I think Emma mentioned before, really, really important in having a positive approach. There's nothing worse when newcomers come into a club and it's something that's brought up, maybe happened 10 years ago or longer, and that negative aspect comes up. Give them the best positive welcome and always looking ahead and how things can be improved. Training and developing skills, I think this is a really important one here as well, in terms of that volunteer workforce, whether it's training, coach education, whether it's kind of other roles behind the scenes, just facilitating any kind of CPD opportunities and developing the skills needed there. And again, the longer these volunteers and kind of workforce are with you on that journey in creating a stronger, healthier club environment, then it's kind of developing those skills and making the most out of them year on year. And then flexibility is the key one here as well in terms of creating that great volunteer culture. I think being flexible, whether that's kind of with the responsibilities or with the kind of hours required from those individuals. I think flexibility on both sides, once again, would be a key factor. And looking at valuing your volunteers, so here I think once you've kind of recruited some of the volunteers, I think it's just embracing them, making sure they feel valued within your setting. So I think a key first part of the jigsaw here would be to have that kind of preparation element in place where volunteers arrive for their first session, and this could be through the form of a volunteer welcome pack. If a volunteer comes to a new setting and they feel, wow, I'm embraced, I'm a positive and kind of happy environment, then straight away that experience for the volunteer, they feel valued. Trusting and embracing the volunteers. So again, what we don't want is kind of volunteers come into a club and they're asked to just stand on the side and take a register week in, week out. Being creative and trusting and embracing those volunteers. I'm sure there's loads of different skills that they could offer, and again, it's just utilising those. Letting the volunteers know then that the work they're doing makes a real difference, and sometimes it could be just through a simple thank you, a simple chat and discussion at the end, and sometimes it doesn't have to come from the committee or the club coaches, and sometimes just something little from the athletes themselves. I think that's a key aspect there, I think, in terms of knowing that they're making a real difference. Like I said, saying that thank you verbally, and then other ways you can say that thank you and show a bit of appreciation is whether it's expenses to competitions or meetings or what have you. It could be some kit and then some other incentives. There's nothing nicer than valuing your volunteers and having them kind of embraced, wearing club colours, club logos, and showing off the badge that they're proud to be involved with. And then volunteer awards. I think this is a really important one because what we've got here is regional, national awards, and often in terms of valuing volunteers, this is a great platform to showcase what you've got locally, regionally, and nationally. And again, there's nothing nicer when someone that you've worked with or someone you've had the pleasure of mentoring or being coached by, seeing those on the kind of regional, national stage picking up awards. You feel good because you know that they've made a real difference as well. And then access to training and mentoring. I know there's some great work within Welsh Athletics at the moment in regards to upskilling and mentoring opportunities with officials and coaches. So these are great examples on where we can get involved and make the most of things. And then that all important aspect of retaining. So we've done the hard work of recruiting and showing a bit of appreciation. So now, in terms of retaining the volunteers, I think that key word of being organised again. So making sure all the code of conduct, the health and safety guidance are in place, and with that comes that kind of organised and kind of a professional setting where they feel actually this is a good environment to be involved with, making them feel needed. So again, like I mentioned, don't just leave your volunteers to get on with it. That mentoring aspect is always something, and then obviously just making sure that they feel that they're a strong part of the club, and again making them feel needed. Whether it's from the committee side, as a club in general, and there's nothing nicer when you hear some of the athletes expressing how much of a difference they do in terms of their volunteering roles. helping them grow. So again, mentioning the CPD opportunities there, and the kind of training and development. So making sure the volunteers are able to access new skills, meet new people, and that keyword of kind of collaboration, communication, kind of listen to the sort of things they'd like to be doing and try and help them. Let's not just assume that we know best, and we're kind of putting the pathway out there from start to finish for the volunteers. Let them create their own path where they want to go and flourish. And then giving them the experience. So in terms of people looking for something that stands out, I think what's important here is the vast opportunities, whether it's local competitions, local events, okay, and making sure that they're kind of looking for that next step, whether it's regional competition, national competition, and only if that's what they want. If they want to stay kind of local and be a kind of more of a club-specific volunteer, then that's great, that's perfect. If they want to go on and develop on a regional or national level, gain more experience and collaborate with others, again, that's fantastic. And then those kind of two tiny words of thank you, those can go so how important they are. And there's nothing worse sometimes in a club environment. Everyone's busy with their own schedules, and they just go kind of, everyone finishes at maybe 8 o'clock or 8:30, and everyone jumps in the car and off they go until next week. I think at the end, I think thank you to one another, from coaches to athletes, vice versa, and then from committee to the volunteers running their club as well. That's really, really important.